So Nick Cannon was on the Ray Daniels Presents podcast on YouTube, which looks very interesting. I never heard of Ray Daniels before, but he looked like he has a very interesting podcast. I will check that out. But when he was on there, Nick was saying, I think they asked him about his marriage to Mariah, and that they asked him what happened. And he basically said, well, there's a point in his marriage where he felt like he didn't know who he was. He said he would lie in bed and saying, well, is this it? Because prior to that, Nick had Drumline, Love Don't Cost a Thing. He had started wilding out. Like, Nick was a burgeoning mogul, mini mogul. And then he marries Mariah, and now he's Mr. Carey. Like, he stifles all of that to be married. And in a lot of ways, I can understand it. I respect the man's honesty. And there's a lot of women that was in those comments of the video, and he said, oh, the only thing I heard was ego, and he was insecure and all that stuff. Like, no, I respect the fact that Nick Cannon was being honest about this. And again, him and Mariah have a pretty decent relationship. She never says anything bad about him, and he never says anything bad about her. Like, I remember when Mariah left Tommy Mottola, and she was basically saying that Tommy Mottola kept her in a cage. Like, Tommy Mottola kept her from being the person she wanted to be. Mariah Carey was far harsher on Tommy Mottola. Like, what Nick Cannon said wasn't really against Mariah. It's just him looking at himself saying, like, I don't know who I am in this marriage. Like, he was saying how Mariah can buy islands. He said, I can't do that. Like, I'm in a different economic tier than she is. Like, she's Mariah. Like, And the funny thing is, I remember when they got together, because I remember he was on 106 in Park, and they asked Nick who was his celebrity crush or who he would like to date in the industry, and he said Mariah Carey. He said, I always loved Mariah Carey. Nick ends up directing a video for Mariah, fall in love, they get married, and then they have their twins, Rock and Roll. And everything should be great, right? But there was a part of Nick that wasn't being fulfilled. And I think the thing that the women in the comments, it wasn't all the women, but most of the women, the thing that I think the women don't seem to understand is that guys instinctively, this is generations upon generations, centuries old, have the hunting, gathering, and protection gene inside of them. So if you're someone like Nick Cannon, you know that Mariah loves you. You know that you're making money, but I think there's a part of him that wishes that he was making as much money as her. So it's almost like he's contributing to the marriage. I think that's a part of it too. I don't think he probably feels like he's contributing to the marriage. But also, it's hard to be that number two. Like, I think it also happened to Bobby Brown. Now, I know it's hard for young folks, you maybe millennials, you Gen Zers, to understand it. But at one point, Bobby Brown, not only, as Whitney Houston said, he was the king of R&B, but he basically was the Prince of Pop. Like, he was right up there at one point with Michael Jackson and Prince, and probably at one point ahead of Michael Jackson and Prince. Bobby Brown was that big of an artist. Like, he had Don't Be Cruel. He was on the Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack. People was getting into Gumby Cut because of him. Like, Bobby Brown was that dude, man. He was dating chicks. He might have dated Janet Jackson, which I do believe. Like, Bobby was out there. And then he's at the Soul Train Awards. Whitney Houston kicks the back of his chair. He turns around. She waves at him. They have a conversation. They start dating. They get married. And they have Bobby Christina. It was all good, even though they had a toxic relationship on both sides. It wasn't just Bob. It should have been all good, but the problem was Bobby Brown went from being, oh my God, that's Bobby Brown, to, oh, hey, it's Bobby Brown. Like, Bobby Brown went from being the biggest star in the world to now becoming Mr. Houston. That's, from an ego standpoint, from a male standpoint, that's a lot going from the top where people are praising you and loving you, like you're the next big thing, you are the big thing, to now you're this great singer's husband. Like, you go on the red carpet, and there's a ton of pictures of Bobby and Whitney together, but I'm sure there was a point where they say, hey, Bobby, can you move over to the left, please? We want to get some pictures of Whitney. And then not even care about any pictures of you. Just kind of like, no, we want Whitney, because Whitney's bigger than you. And I know, and Bob knew who he married, just like Nick knows he's married to Mariah. But it's hard being a guy when you're something, or even a bit of something, and now you're number two. Like, Nick was saying how, he was the one carrying the diaper bag, right? Some guys are okay with that position. I remember, like, Meryl Streep's husband, I forget his name, which is unfortunate, her ex-husband. He was a sculptor. And they were married for like 40 some odd years. And he was perfectly fine with being in the background, uh, taking care of the kids while Meryl made tons and tons of movies. Like Meryl Streep worked all the time. And they had a couple few kids. So somebody had to raise those kids and it was on him. But he was perfectly fine with that. Keke Palmer's boyfriend, baby daddy. There's that video a couple of years ago where she's walking into an event. She's wearing like a leopard outfit. She looked good in it. But then there he was walking behind with the baby going like this. But he was perfectly fine with that until she went to the Usher concert and they complained about it. Oh, all that mess. But they seem to be together now. But some guys are fine being with number twos. But when you're ambitious people like a Bobby Brown, like a Nick Cannon, that's hard. Okay, I'll give you somebody else. Elton John's husband. I think his name was David. I think it was a documentary or something. And he said he knows he's married to Elton John. He understands that I'm David. He's Elton. I understand who I'm married to. But it does hurt when they go to events and they take pictures of them and then they tell him to move to the side, or people don't know that that's Elton's husband and a photographer pushes them aside, or fans just pushing them aside to get to Elton and he's just some random dude. Or where they go to an event and Elton's sitting at the front table of everybody else and David's in the back with all the rest of the spouses. Listen, I know women like Paulette Washington, Denzel's wife, and Sam Jackson's wife. I know they all have to deal with the same thing. But again, instinctively as a guy, you feel you're born with this gene inside of you saying, "Hey, I'm a dude. I'm a man. Respect me." And I'm sure women don't seem to care about that or not. But I'm telling you, it's hard for a guy when you're guys like Bobby Brown and Nick Cannon to suppress your ego. It's hard. It's really hard, even though you're trying. Okay, so let's say, so what would you rather say? Would you rather have Nick say what he said, saying, "Listen, I didn't know who I was in this marriage," or did you want him to say, "Well, so hey Nick, so what happened between you and Mariah?" "Well, Hollywood, man, like she's making music, I'm doing Wild 'N Out, like I'm on tour, she's on tour, man, and we just drifted apart. I love her, we're the best of friends, but it's just timing." And I bet you a lot of women probably would have accepted that that lie. It's like, yes, I understand. It's probably hard in Hollywood, boo. But in real life, Nick told the truth, and women are just ripping him for it. There was one woman who said, well, he still could have done all these things and still be married to Mariah. Impossible. It would have been impossible. If Nick Cannon was married to Mariah, and he was still doing Wild 'N Out, and he was still hosting The Masked Singer, and doing his radio show, and all these things, time-wise, they wouldn't have made it. When Mariah Carey's making an album, she's all in. When Nick Cannon's doing Wild 'N Out, it's not just he's the host, he's producing the show. I'm sure he does jokes. They film him kind of quick, but it's still a lot of shows. And then he got his daily radio show and got The Masked Singer, and they film like 2 a season. Like, Nick's done so much since he's gotten divorced. I think if he was married and he didn't do any of those things, he would have became bitter. He still would have loved Mariah because it wouldn't have been her fault, but he would have been bitter because he would have had this creativity that's burning inside of him. But he said, "No, I'm going to be a stay-at-home dad. I'm going to raise our twins. She's the breadwinner. She's the one. She's the star. I'm going to stifle who I am." And again, I know women have done this all the time, but I'm telling you, instinctively as a guy, that's hard to do. So in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad that they did divorce and they end up being friends now. Because I think if he stayed in the marriage and not done anything and stifled his creativity, there would have been bitterness and anger, and their marriage would have ended ugly. And we've seen too many ugly marriages. So what do you think? Am I wrong? I don't think I am. The one thing I always say, I hate the term speaking my truth. Because when a woman speaks her truth, like Tia Mowry said, "I'm graduating from my marriage." It was like, oh, yes, graduate, girl, graduate. When she spoke her truth, that's accepted. But when Nick Cannon spoke his truth about feeling like I'm not sure who I am in this marriage, is met with scorn. Why is there such a double standard when it comes to that speaking my truth thing? Like, and again, this is all women. I think there are a lot of sensible women out there who understands what I'm saying. But there's a lot of women who just look at Nick Cannon as like, "Oh, your ego got in the way. You're insecure." When they should be praising him for speaking his truth.